This tutorial is going to carry on from the last tutorial and show you how to set up a sheet to start placing your drawings on and to print to a PDF. One thing I forgot to do in the last tutorial was rename the second section. So I want to rename that North, South Building Section. So that once I place it on the sheet, it is labeled properly. So you notice in our project browser toolbar, down near the bottom, we have Sheets All, and there's no plus symbol. That's because there's no title block and no sheet set up yet. So I want to right click and do a new sheet. Revit automatically comes with this title block set up in it, and so we can use this one, but I'll also show you how to go access other title blocks that are in the library. So if I hit OK, it now sets up a sheet, and we hit the plus symbol next to it, and it by default creates the first sheet as A101, or based on whatever you set up other sheets. Like if I set up an E101 for electrical, the next new sheet it will create will be E102. So A is used for architectural drawings, and A is appropriate for what we're doing right now. So we can keep the A101, but we can change the name based on what we're going to put on the sheet. I'm going to rename this one A101 Floor Plans. But for your project, you can name it based on the assignment or anything else that you feel is appropriate once you look at the examples provided by the professor. So based on this, we can see some of the things that come in. You may have noticed that the word floor plans actually got changed on there because it was unnamed at first. It puts in the sheet number, but then it has other things that are empty, like scale. And scale is actually going to start to autofill as you put drawings on the sheet. You can change things like author. So I'm the author here, so I would put my name, or I can put my initials, which is what a lot of companies do. We want to put an issue date even though we have the date right here, and that's because issue dates are official dates that we issue things like construction sets, we issue bidding sets, review sets, and so this is the date that something is actually printed, but the issue date is going to stay the same based on what that drawing was issued for. So I'm going to put today's date in, and you can use any format that you like, but typically short and sweet is the best. Project number is used by architecture firms. They're typically related to the year in which they got a signed contract for the project and also the number of the project within that year. So if it's the first project in 2021, it might be called 01-2021 or 2021.1. You can use things like the assignment number, whatever number that you feel is appropriate. But also it should make some sense as well. So if we look at project name, you could do things like the assignment. You could call it case study. Again, whatever you feel is appropriate. Owner, of course, is going to be who your client is, but that could be something like the class name. It's up to you as to how you organize it, but there is certain information required to be on those, so you want to make sure that those things are adjusted accordingly. And you can see here actually why you might want to use initials, because the way this is set up, this text box was not made long enough off to the side to allow for too much text, so initials are probably the most appropriate. Checker, you could put your professor, or you could put yourself because you're reviewing your work. It's up to you. Now this is a default title block, and so if I want to actually make any adjustments to it, which I should because you are not working for Autodesk, you should make your own logo for your architecture firm. You can put in your own website. You're not having any consultants in this particular project, so what I want to do is double click on it, and it will open the original file. And just like we have with other elements that we bring in like doors and windows, we never want to overwrite an existing file. So we can do a file, save as, and you notice when you hover over save as, family is open because anything that we add to a Revit project is a family. A door, a window, a title block, they're all families, they're not projects. What you build three-dimensionally is your project. So if I go to family, it's asking me to save it in a different place from the library, so I can save it somewhere that I know where it's going to be to use throughout the semester or to use in the future. Or I can even load in a different title block. So we can go back to our file, because remember we opened this separately. So if I go back to that sheet and I go to the Insert tab, just like we were looking at inserting doors and windows that way as opposed to through the property, I can go to Load Family, and then I can go back to my family, US Imperial, and scroll down to the bottom, Title Blocks. And this folder is empty, which means that when Revit installed on this computer, it did not install those items. So if your folder is empty, you can edit the existing title block. I'm going to have to do that, but if you do have that, you're going to see different sizes that are going to be closer in size to something you might want to use. So if I zoom back out and I just use the measure tool just to see how big it is, I can see that it's quite large. It's 3'6" wide by 2'6" tall, and that's a little too big, more than likely. So if I want to change things, I can edit things by selecting either from right to left, which selects everything that it touches, or I can select from left to right, which selects only things that it encompasses. But one of the things that I want to do is actually, and I have to forget that I need to do that back in the main project. So I need to do a File, Save As. I'm going to save it to my desktop, and I can move it somewhere else later. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to call it 24 by 36 with my last name so that I remember what it's for. So now, since I know that it's not 24 by 36, I can use multiple ways to adjust it. I can use the Dimension tool, which the shorthand is up at the top, or I can go to the Modify tool, the Annotate tool, and add that, but within Families, it's under the Create tool. So I click each line, make sure it highlights blue, and I can raise that up, and one of the benefits of that is I can actually select just those two lines, and I know they're selected because they are blue, and then I can click on the actual dimension. Well, you usually can click on the dimension. Okay, well that didn't work. Usually you can click on the dimension and it moves it for you. So instead what I can do is I can move it over using the arrows until I get to the 3 foot that I want. This is taking a little while. So I know that I want 24 by 36, so it's 3 feet wide. And for some reason this is at micro measurements while it's doing that. Almost there. Alright, I'm at 3 foot in one direction. We can see the visual difference now. I can delete that because I don't need that anymore, and I can do the same thing in the opposite direction. And with that, again, I want to just select things that I want to move. So I don't want to move the bottom half of it, but I can delete all of these consultant items. I can delete the Autodesk logo and the website, and I'm even going to delete that line. So I have plenty of room for my company logo and my company information. And I'm just going to select those lines that I want to move. And so I'm going to then watch and just scroll down until it gets to 2 feet, 24 inches. And unfortunately this is taking a little longer. But typically you can usually click on something and move it, but it may be because I clicked on multiple things and it won't let me click on the dimension itself to adjust that difference. So once we have this edited, we can then reload it into Revit, and anytime we want to make changes, we can just open the original. But there are some things, as I showed you, that you can change right then and there. So I'm going to hit Save. Control S, and then you notice up here at the top I can say load into project or load into project and close because I'm not going to make any more changes right now. Another thing I might want to do is maybe make this title block not quite so wide. These are all margins, and this exterior line is the line of the paper itself. I'm going to hit load into project and close. The only project we have open is where it's going to go, but if you have more than one project, it's going to ask you which project you want to go into. You notice it went to the floor plan instead of the sheet, and so it gives us this default that says it can't put it in the current mode, which is totally fine. So we're going to go back to the sheet, and that sheet that we created is loaded, but we haven't put it on here yet. So the title block is selected, and so I can actually go look at the sheet, and I can change it from the default to the one I just brought in. And you notice that I started with that size, so it still is telling me that it's that size, but I renamed it to 24 by 36 Gregory. So when I select it, it's much smaller. So I want to save again, and then what I want to do is start putting floor plans on my sheet. So my first floor over here in Project Browser, I want to click on and drag it onto the sheet and then let go of the mouse, and then it lets me put that on the sheet. Obviously the area is much too large, and that's because that's the extent of the drawing. So what I can do is I can double click in the view, similar to this being paper space and this being model space, or I can go back to the original view and move those elevation symbols, whichever you're more comfortable with. I prefer to do it on the sheet because then I can see the impacts of that. And again, it's sometimes easier just to use the arrow keys and move stuff around and get those relatively close to the drawing so that it takes up less space on the sheet. You also have to think about that as you're organizing your sheet and you get more and more drawings on there. You might have to maneuver things around to make sure that dimensions, section symbols, and elevation symbols will all fit. So now that I'm done, I can double click back outside of the view, and you see that it's much smaller. Unfortunately though, our drawing title is still way down here. They're connected, so if I click on the view itself, I can move the view up, but then if I want to move the drawing title, I need to click on the drawing title itself and move it around. If I want to make the line shorter, I have to then click on the view again, and we notice this blue dot pops up and it allows us to adjust that. So we can do that to add all of our floors onto a sheet. Other drawings like our elevations, we can create new sheets by going back to the sheets, new sheet, and now we have two options to choose from, the 24 by 36 or the default. And now I have a second sheet where I could add elevations. Now if I go back to my sheet, another thing I want to do is I want to add a different drawing title, because you notice we don't have any symbols for the sections yet because we haven't put the sections on the sheet, but we don't have the bubble like we have here that shows the sheet number along with the drawing number. So we need a new drawing title for that. So what I want to do is go up to the Insert tab, go to Load Family, and go back to my General Library, and this will be in the Annotations folder. And I need to scroll all the way down to the bottom to View Title with Sheet. And you notice it starts to look like that. So I want to open that up, and because I'm going to make some changes, I'm going to save it as a new one. Well, I thought I opened it. Let me try it again. Oh, I loaded it in. That's right. I did it wrong. So first I actually want to open it because I want to make some changes. And part of the problem is I don't know where my drawing title is, so I need to find that first to make any edits. Well, what I can do is I can show you how to add the other one. So I click on the drawing title. I have to go to Edit Type with this one. And within the title, you notice how it says View Title, but the one I just added was View Title with Sheet. And when I hit Apply, it adds that bubble. The one thing that's missing is the word Scale in front of the scale. So what I can do is I can double click on that, and the hard part is that it then opened my view, so I don't want to do that. I can click on it, and typically we can open original from here, but it doesn't seem like it's going to let us do that. Okay, well, I will work on that and do another tutorial on how to make that adjustment. But this is how you start creating sheets and adding drawings to sheets, and in the next tutorial I will show you how to print to PDF.